New coronavirus restrictions have come into force here in Germany as it attempts to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. With New Year's Eve fast approaching, the government is placing tighter limits on public and private celebrations. It's also urging those still unvaccinated to get the jab. Just before the new restrictions took effect, people protested in cities across the country.
Hundreds of people demand to pass. Tensions ran high on the streets of Zittau in the eastern state of Saxony on Monday night. Just one of many protests organized across the country against the government's coronavirus restrictions and COVID-19 vaccines. It was a tense but a peaceful protest. In the nearby town of Bautzen, police were attacked with fireworks and bottles as they attempted to break up an unauthorized protest. Authorities reported at least 10 officers injured. In the capital, Berlin, there is little understanding of the violence that has erupted, and for those who still refuse to get vaccinated. We all get every mandatory vaccine when we go on holiday without questioning it, so what's happening now is ridiculous. I think it's not necessary to take to the streets and attack police officers. To use violence, you should do it peacefully. We're all in the same boat, so why do some have to kick up a fuss? I don't know if it's the right way, but people probably don't know how else to express themselves. Almost a year to the day after the vaccination campaign started, Berlin Mayor Franziska Giffey visited a COVID-19 intensive care unit. She repeated the government's plea to the quarter of the population still unvaccinated in Germany.
Lassen Sie sich impfen.
Get vaccinated. I can only say it again and again. The people lying here in this hospital, many of them are probably thinking, if only I had done it. Perhaps then it would have prevented this from happening. There are opponents to the vaccine and the measures, but over half of the population support measures now in place. But officials are bracing themselves for a new wave of infections with the more transmissible Omicron variant, which could overwhelm Germany's critical healthcare infrastructure.
Well, joining us is Hayot Sieb. He's a professor of epidemiology at the University of Bremen here in Germany. Hi, welcome to DW. Now, over a quarter of the German population is still unvaccinated. So what actually can be done at this stage to convince them to get the jab?
Yeah, this is a difficult task. It's not a homogeneous group. Obviously, there are some who will still go for the jab. They will need information. They will need sort of low barrier access to vaccination, and that will work. But we also have a hardened group of people for whom it's more of a Weltanschauung thing. It's not really about vaccination. It's more about opposition in general. And those ones, it's much harder to reach, and I'm afraid we won't reach them with what is on offer now.
Right, so it's still a tough job for authorities. Now, Germany, along with many other countries, are seeing sharp rises in infections. But at the same time, we're actually seeing infections in countries like South Africa and Denmark, who experienced their waves a little bit earlier, drop quite quickly. What does this data tell us about Omicron?
Yeah, if these things come through, as you mentioned, then that would be really nice, which would probably mean we have a hard and quick wave that runs through the population. If that was the case, especially with a vaccination rate that we have here and some immunity due to previous disease, then this would also mean that perhaps, through January, this would already be on the decline again, which would be very good news for all the, hospitals and people expecting to be hit hard by the Omicron wave coming up now.
All right, so we're talking about the Omicron wave. Now, what if there's another spike and a rapid spread of, say, a new variant? What then?
Well, this is always possible, but I'm relatively optimistic. This Omicron is really very infectious, and in the realm of virology, I don't think there are many other viruses that really have this kind of infectivity as it is now. So maybe that side, there's not too much more to expect, but you never know. We have experienced a few variants, so we need to be aware of new variants, but we are already gaining immunity to some degree against all future coronaviruses as we move along.
All right, so some level of positivity there, cautious optimism. Now, are vaccinations, boosters and, of course, masks the future, not just for Germany, but also globally?
Well, I would more generally say it's immunity that's what is on the agenda for everyone, and that can be achieved by vaccination. Unfortunately, many countries vaccinations are not available as much as they here in Germany. So for us, yes, it's vaccinations. It's probably being ready to distance once it is, continuously needed or again needed in times of rises of peaks. But masks, yeah, I'm sure we will probably need masks once in a while, but not permanently every time, all the time with us. So I think we just need to be prepared and better prepared than we've been. But overall, I think we are getting better, I think, in dealing with Omicron and other variants.
Okay, Hayo Tzi, Professor of Epidemiology. Thank you for joining us on DW and all the best in 2022.
Thanks.
Germany's Constitutional Court has ordered Parliament to immediately issue laws protecting people with disabilities in pandemic-related triage situations. Now, triage is the process of prioritising patients for treatment. For example, if hospitals are unable to cope with demand for intensive care. The case was filed by a group of people with disabilities and pre-existing conditions. They expressed fears they would be denied treatment if the pandemic pushes hospitals to their limits. Well, joining us for more is Professor Peter Dabrock. He is the former chair of the German Ethics Council and specialises in the ethics of technical and scientific interference with human life. Hi, Professor Dabrock, and welcome to the show. Now, why did people with disabilities feel they needed to go to court to get a ruling on this?
First, thanks for having me. They are concerned that because of their fear of disabilities, they might be disadvantaged in the case of shortage of medical treatment. This is the reason why they went to Karlsruhe, the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court came to the ruling that the legislator has immediately and rapidly to change the legal frame in order to protect these people.
Right, well then, from an ethical point of view, how can doctors make a choice of who lives or who dies in their hospital?
First of all, it's fair to say that this is one of the most challenging situations for doctors at all, because of the potential shortage of medical treatment. So they have to balance, on the one hand, to meet the legal requirements. On the other hand, they have also to meet ethical criteria as the prospect of surveillance, of survival, and on the other hand, also the basic dignity of each human being. And this is extremely difficult to balance in this given catastrophic situation. And therefore, we have to look for this balancing in order not to limit the scope of action for doctors, and on the other hand, nevertheless, to keep the frame of the constitutional frame. And this is so extremely difficult to manage.
Professor Peter Dabrock, thank you for joining us on DW.